السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا والحقنا بعبادك الصالحين. آمين آمين. This is lesson number 22 in Tafseer, the 20th call to the believers. And we are almost one quarter of the way through this calls to the believers in the Quran. And in this call to the believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about certain aspects which are all linked into the theme of the surah, and we'll discuss it in more detail once we begin with the commentary. Inshallah, we'll begin by first listening to the recitation of the ayat, and thereafter the translation, and then the commentary. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض منكم ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم إن الله كان بكم رحيما ومن يفعل ذلك عدوانا وظلما فسوف نصليه نارا وكان ذلك على الله يسيرا إن تجتنبوا كبائر ما تنهون عنه نكفر عنكم سيئاتكم وندخلكم مدخلا كريما ولا تتمنوا ما فضل الله به بعضكم على بعض للرجال نصيب مما اكتسبوا وللنساء نصيب مما اكتسبن واسألوا الله من فضله إن الله كان بكل شيء عليما.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Here's ayat number 29 to 32 from Surah Al Nisa, the 20th call to the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, O you who have believed, do not consume one and another's wealth unjustly, but only in business by mutual consent. And do not kill yourselves. Indeed, Allah is to you ever merciful. And whoever does that in aggression and injustice, then we will drive him into a fire, and that for Allah is easy. If you avoid the major sins which you are forbidden, we will remove from you your lesser sins and admit you to a noble entrance, paradise. And do not wish for that by which Allah has made some of you exceed others. For men is a share of what they have earned, and for women is a share of what they have earned. And ask Allah of His bounty. Indeed, Allah is ever of all things knowing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by calling out to the believers, and we should listen carefully always when you hear the call to the believers. And in this call to the believers, it is followed up by a prohibition and not a command. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits us in this call to the believers in doing that or consuming our wealth in an unlawful manner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La ta'kulu, do not eat, do not consume. And the word here which is used is akl. Akl means from actual eating or actual consuming. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many places in the Quran, when He refers to wealth and that which is gained through wealth, especially money, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word akl or eating of that wealth when it is done unlawfully, because that wealth eventually will sustain you in what you consume to maintain your body. That is why Allah says in other places in the Quran, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى ظُلْمًا. Verily those who eat the wealth of the orphan, the inheritance of the orphan, in oppression, unlawfully. What does Allah say? We will فَسَوْفَ نُصْلِهِ نَارًا. We will burn him in the fire. The fire is his reward. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in other places in the Quran, Or Allah rather says, even in the same ayah, إن الذين يأكلون أموال اليتامى ظلما إنما يأكلون في بطونهم نارا, making it clear, they eat into their stomachs nar, fire. And in another place in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about interest, and He says aklu riba, the eating of interest. So when Allah speaks about wealth and how it is attained, and if it is attained in a manner which is unlawful, Allah uses the word that you are eating that which is unlawful. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who have believed, do not consume one and another's wealth unjustly, but only in lawful business. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says one another's, or the translation says one another's wealth. However, in the Arabic it says amwalakum. It says do not consume your wealth. That is a correct translation. Do not consume your wealth unlawfully, and the word for your is plural. So do not consume the wealth of your brothers unlawfully. And why is it used in plural or not one another's wealth? Because the wealth of your brother is like your wealth. The rights of your brother are like your rights. The responsibility of your brother is like your responsibility, because we are all one ummah. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam maintained this in a hadith and informed us, giving us an example of how this one ummah functions. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Al-mu'minu lil-mu'mini kal-bunyan. The believer for a believer is like a bunyan, like a structure. يَشُدُّ بَعْضُهُ بَعْضًا. Each part of the structure holds the other part up, or it keeps it steady. Example, any structure. If you remove a wall from a structure, the roof may collapse. If you remove a lintel from the structure, the pillars, the weight may crush the pillars or may crush the beams. Whatever it is, if you remove a pillar, you may find that structure collapsing, or it may affect the integrity of the structure. That is like the believer. We for each other, our rules and our regulations are like the structure which is held up. As soon as you impose and you infringe on the rights of your brother, it is like you are damaging your own self. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Amwalakum, your wealth. Do not eat your wealth, meaning your wealth and your brother's wealth. Because what is his? If you usurp it, you have harmed him and you have harmed yourself. You have harmed him by taking away from his dunya, and you have harmed yourself by inflicting upon yourself or inviting upon yourself punishment. So Allah says here, and this is very important, do not eat your wealth unlawfully. Illa an takuna tijara. Except if it is tijara. Except if it is tijara, business. And this word that's used here, illa, is an exception. It's saying except if it is business. Does it mean that you are allowed to eat the wealth of somebody in business? Doesn't mean that. This word illa, which is an exception, we use it in English as well, except, it's called exceptions, is called in Arabic al-istithna al-munqati', meaning the exception is not from the portion of which it has been excluded. It doesn't mean that you can eat wealth in business unlawfully. What does it mean? It means that the exchange of wealth in business, if done in a manner which is correctly, there is not eating the wealth of your brother, because you took his wealth and you gave him something in response. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ تِجَارَةً عَن تَرَاضٍ مِّنْكُمْ, with mutual consent. So that is what is meant by the ayah. And this ayah here is general for all types of wealth and all types of contracts, meaning that Allah is forbidding you in business from doing business dealings which are prohibited, forbidding you from stealing even if it's out of business, for forbidding you from usurping the wealth of the orphan or usurping the inheritance of the inheritors. And this happens very, very frequently. Men sometimes are unfair based on what customs they have inherited from their forefathers, and these are customs that is not the law of Allah. So they leave their daughters out of the inheritance, or they leave one of the sons out of the inheritance and give most to the eldest son, or they do certain things. They leave the wife out of the inheritance, or the mother or the father, they let one person inherit, or even in their lifetimes, they may do certain things which cause those in their family who have a right to their wealth to be cut off from this wealth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids all of this. Why does Allah mention business specifically after this? Business specifically is mentioned because most of the time, because business is a day-to-day dealing, it's not like, for example, inheritance, which happens once in a person's life, or other actions which are dealt with in terms of wealth once a year. But business is a day-to-day action which most people go through. In fact, almost all of us at some point in our life have to go through business, whether we are involved in it directly or whether we are involved in a transaction when we purchase something. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions business specifically because of its frequency of occurrence. It's a day-to-day transaction. Everybody Either they are taking money and giving goods, or they are purchasing, giving money and receiving goods. Allah is saying, except if it's in business, you are allowed to take money from somebody, عن تراض منكم, but it must be by mutual consent. And here the Sharia gives an understanding. The word for tijara, the word tijara used in the Arabic language, the definition of it is ibaratun anil muawada. It's a word used to talk about al-muawada. Muawada means a commutative contract on the basis of exchange. Any exchange that you have from one party to another, where it is through substitution, you substitute what you have for what the other person has, that is called tijara in the Sharia. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he spoke about the believers and what they do in this world, our actions in this world are exchanged for what is in the year after. If those actions stem from ta'ah, from obedience for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there is tijara, there is a commutative contract between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on exchange. We exchange what we have done in this world for Allah's reward in the year after. If the action stemmed from that which was obedience, then the reward would be that which is paradise. And if the action stemmed from disobedience, then the commutative contract of exchange would be that which is punishment. Hence, there is the way it is understood in the Sharia. It is also used not only for worldly purposes in terms of exchange of goods and wealth, but also in exchange of this world, which is a world of a test, or where we are working for what is in the year after, so that we may purchase what is in the year after, or so that Allah may purchase from us what we have in this world for something better in the year after. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly even uses the words in the Quran. He says in Surah Al-Saf, ayah number 10, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you believe, and we'll come to it inshallah in its details. هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم? Should I guide you to a tijara, to a business transaction, which will save you from a severe punishment? And then Allah mentions believe in Him and the Messenger and the last day, and fight in jihad fi sabilillah. And we'll come to it inshallah in its details towards the end of the Quran. It's in towards the very last chapters of the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when He purchased from us in this world, Inna Allah ashtara min al-mu'minina, in Surah At-Tawbah, ayah number 111, Anfusahum wa amwalahum, verily Allah has purchased from the believers their lives and their wealth, بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ, and for them, for that is Jannah. What Allah has purchased for us in terms of our wealth is what we have to give voluntarily and what is compulsory upon us. Our lives, what we have to do. Allah says after that in the ayah, فَيَقْتُلُونَ وَيُقْتَلُونَ, they are killed, they kill and they are killed, meaning jihad. And there is a promise from Allah. So Allah has purchased this from us. Our lives, we belong to Allah. And even though we are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's property, Allah is treating us in a manner that say He purchased this life from us so that He may reward us with that which is better. The same way, if you purchase something from somebody and they enumerate you with that which you desire. So if you desire paradise, then be obedient. And if you do not desire paradise, and all of us should desire it, or if you do the actions of that which is not befitting of paradise, then you have been purchased for punishment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Allah says many places in the Quran, يَرْجُونَ تِجَارَةً لَن تَبُورَ, speaking about one, those who will be given their reward in full, and they establish prayer. Allah says they are the ones who hope for business which will not diminish. يَرْجُونَ تِجَارَةً لَن تَبُورَ, in Surah Fatir, towards the end of the surah. So even our worldly life is a transaction. But I said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks here in this ayah specifically about business, because business is something that occurs on a day-to-day basis between all of us. Every single one of us has to go through this at some point. You will definitely go buy something. It's a business transaction. Allah does taqeed. He now confines this transaction to what? عن تراض منكم, it must be mutual consent. Meaning, you cannot be forced into a contract to do something if it is not through mutual consent. That is why a contract cannot be ratified if one of the parties is not satisfied. So even, and there is something that occurs in the Arab world and in other places, it might have occurred previously in our places, and it might occur also sometimes between us, where a woman, her consent is not taken in nikah, and a husband and a father gives her to a man, and a contract is then stipulated, and the mayor is taken. It is a contract. The contract there cannot stand, because why? Her consent was not taken, or she is not happy. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, a woman came to him saying that my father has married me to his nephew, ليرفع خصيصته, so that I may elevate so his status. Why? Because he had a low status, and my uncle has a higher status than him, so he wants me to marry from them, so his status is elevated. And she said, I'm not happy. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told her, if you want, we can nullify it, and if you want, you may remain, and the contract will stand. What did she do? She said, the contract will stand, but I just wanted men to know that they do not have the right over their daughters in this way. So all of the contracts, there is general now, for all contracts, they must be عن تراضٍ منكم. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, عن تراضٍ منكم, they should be through mutual consent, including business contracts or anything which is a contract. In marriage is a contract done between the husband and wife, with those who execute the contract at its time, and the two parties which are involved. The husband, he does qabul at the time. He accepts the wife, and the wife must give consent for that acceptance. So all of these contracts are included in this ayah. There are certain transactions, just to mention a few, which people may do, but they don't realize these transactions fall out of the fold of the Sharia. One specific transaction is known as Bay al-Urban. Bay al-Urban. And anybody involved in business may have come across something similar, where somebody pays you a deposit for something, and thereafter they may come back and say that, I don't want to conclude the deal, I'm not happy, and it's not concluded, I want my deposit back. So you tell them, we hold 70% of your deposit, you can have 30% back. That 70% is not your right. That 70% is not your right in terms of that. This is what you call Bay al-Urban. And Imam Malik said in his Muwatta, and he narrated this from the Sahaba, from the Tabi'een, from the Sahaba, that they said, Inna an-Nabiyya sallallahu alayhi wa sallam naha an bay al-urban. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam forbade this type of business, that you take somebody's wealth and you hold it as a guarantee, and then if they say they don't want the stock or the item, you take a percentage of it, or you hold it and you say, there is mine now because it was given to me and I held it for you. You cannot do that. There should be an understanding. And sometimes people do it, they say, no, the understanding is there's an admin fee. And we know there's no admin fee. You took the money, you held it. Where's the admin fee? No, I have to do my books. Are your books worth that admin fee? Subhanallah. Or it needs to be updated on the system. Is it worth that admin fee? There is Bay al-Urban, and there is not allowed in the Sharia. And other types of instances where they may be shubha, they may be doubt. Sometimes in a marketplace, especially if you go to places which are selling food, they have testers, and they tell you test the food, try it, and you try it and you have no intention of buying it. That also is not allowed. You can't try it without the intention of buying it. There must be an intention of buying it, because the person is only giving it to you if you have that intention to buy it. If you don't have the intention to buy it and you try, that is not allowed. In fact, the shubha is so great, the doubt is so great, you shouldn't even test it. You shouldn't even go to use testers if you are not going to purchase something, because this falls into that you have taken it contingent on him wanting you to purchase the entire amount, and that contingency cannot be fulfilled because you don't know whether you will like it or not. So rather, you should ask the person, am I obliged to buy something I taste? If they tell you you're not obliged and we're just giving it to you, then it's fine. If it is that you are obliged, or they tell you that I want you to buy it if you taste it, then you have to buy it. But if he tells you there's no obligation, no problem. Secondly, from your side, you must say, I have an intention of buying it if it tastes good. If one of the two fail, meaning he tells you there is an obligation, you can't just come and taste things, or if you yourself have an intention and you lie and you say, no, I will buy if it tastes good, but you don't. So your intention must be based on it. I see the price, it looks reasonable, no problem. Okay, let me taste it. Is there obligation? No obligation. Then you can taste it and no problem. But if any of these structures fall away, then you fall into shubha, into doubt, and it's better to stay away from that type of business. And that is why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in a hadith, which is in Dar Qutni, Imam Al-Dhabi said that this hadith is not, its chain of narrators is good. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, At-tajiru, As-saduqu, Al-aminu, Al-muslimu, Ma'an nabiyyin, was-siddiqeen, was-shuhada yawm al-qiyamah. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, At-tajir, the businessman, As-saduq, who is truthful, Al-amin, who is trustworthy, Al-Muslim, who is a believer, submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is with the prophets, ma'an nabiyyin, was-siddiqeen, and the truthful ones, was-shuhada, and the martyrs, yawm al-qiyamah, on the day of qiyamah. Al-Dhabi commented on this hadith, and he said it doesn't mean that he is with them, he is on the same level. You can be with somebody, but it does not mean you are on the same level in terms of reward. And there are many actions, which is this verse here indicates in terms of business, about mutual consent, which sometimes people feel we overstep. We don't understand we are overstepping it. And this happens with somebody who's bartering on a day-to-day basis. I'm not talking about big business where you don't meet the people. And it may even be something which is which may be from big business. When it comes to advertising, you advertise in a manner which has exaggeration, which is not the fact. In the same way, somebody, when they're doing business, They say, Wallahi, I promise you won't find anything like this. So the dislike things when it comes to business or dealings in business is to take a qasam on Allah, to take oaths. You won't find anything like this. This price, you can't beat it. And people take oaths unnecessarily. The second thing is, sometimes you tell people, say Salah on Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We don't see it here, but in the Arab world you see it. Say Salah on Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So people say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. And they do it just to entice you to purchase something. Or you advertise in a manner which is not actually indicative of the truth of what the reality of the situation is. And many other things when it comes to business are looked down upon, but we don't take them as being looked down upon or incorrect. They are makruh and some of them are haram. For that matter, when it comes to salah, those who busy themselves with business at the time of salah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about them. He speaks about who are men. He says, Rijal, la tulhihim, tijaratun, wa la bay'un an dhikrillah wa iqamis salah. Men are the ones who are not deviated and they are not busied by business upon their remembrance of Allah and the salah. Their business and what they do does not take them away from salah or the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They give first preference to that. So the ayah says, oh, you will believe, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, la ta'kulu amwalakum, do not eat your wealth, bainakum, between yourselves, bil batil, in falsehood, in haram, illa an takuna tijara, except if it is business, an taradi minkum, with mutual consent. We explain that, wala taqtulu anfusakum, and do not kill yourselves. The next part of the ayah. What does this mean, do not kill yourselves? The consensus of the meaning of the verse in this specific context is do not kill each other. The meaning is do not kill each other. And that is from the kabair, meaning you are not allowed to murder for some worldly gain or anything which is haram. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a punishment, and murder is from one of the kabair, the major sins. He says, وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ. Whoever kills a believer متعمدا, intentionally, meaning if it will happen by a mistake, it is not the same. فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ, then his outcome, his jaza, his reward is Jahannam. وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ, and Allah's anger is upon him. وَلَعَنَهُ, and his curse. وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared for him عَظِيمًا, عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا, a great punishment. That is if you kill somebody. So the consensus is speaking about each other here. However, what's included in the meaning is al-intihar, suicide. You are not allowed to commit suicide, because suicide is also from those actions which are prohibited, and this ayah, in its general meaning, not in specific meaning, indicates that suicide, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbid you from it. Now somebody may say, what's the appropriateness of mentioning this in this ayah here? It's appropriate because when you take somebody's rights upon them, it may cause that person to fall into destruction and death. That is the appropriateness of mentioning to not kill each other. However, the general meaning we said includes suicide yourself, because your body is given to you as a amana, and you do business with it in this world so that you may gain the substitution in the akhirah, which is paradise. So your body is not yours to begin with. And the punishment for suicide is great. It is also from one of the kabair, one of the major sins. And some of the scholars said it is even worse to kill yourself than to murder somebody else. How? Somebody may ask the question, how? Well, when you murder somebody else, we're not speaking about the rida of Allah. We're not saying that we are now objecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's what He has ordained for us. But when you kill yourself, you're objecting to what has been ordained upon you, and you're saying you're not happy, you don't have rida, you don't have pleasure for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has apportioned for you in this world. Over and above that, you are taking a life. And the life of a believer is great in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why the punishment for suicide is severe. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in a hadith, which was narrated by Abu Hurairah, where he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, من قتل نفسه بحديدة فحديده في يدي يتوجه بها بطنه في نار جهنم خالدا فيها أبدا. Whoever kills himself with a hadid, meaning with a dagger, then he will have the dagger killing himself or stabbing himself in the stomach up until the day of Qiyamah, and then you will remain in the fire khalidan mukhallada, doing the same action. He will be punished with the manner in which he took his life. And the hadith goes on, وَمَنْ شَرِبَ سُمًّا فَقَتَلَ نَفْسَهُ فَهُوَ يَتَحَسَّاهُ فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمْ خَالِدًا مُخَلَّدًا فِيهَا أَبَدًا. Whoever drinks or ingests poison so that he may kill himself, then he will keep ingesting it in the fire خَالِدًا مُخَلَّدًا, forever. He will be punishing himself in the same way that he took his life. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, وَمَنْ تَرَدَّى مِنْ جَبَلٍ فَقَتَلَ نَفْسَهُ فَهُوَ يَتَرَدَّى فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمْ خَالِدًا مُخَلَّدًا فِيهَا أَبَدًا. Whoever throws himself from a mountain and kills himself, then he will throw himself from a mountain in hellfire, and it will be like that forever. Khalidan mukhallala. There is a punishment for the one who takes his own life, and it is also from al-kabair. It is also from al-kabair, from the major sins. Then also the third opinion or the third meaning that can be derived generally is that by usurping the wealth of each other, Allah says, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, you are inviting upon yourself that which is worse than death. You are inviting upon yourself punishment. Do not kill yourselves. Like we said, suicide or killing somebody else or inviting upon yourself punishment. And thereafter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah kana bikum rahima. Verily Allah to you all is rahim, He is merciful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids you from doing that which may harm you in this world and in the year after. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids you from that which is bad for you. That is why He is arhamu bika min nafsik. He is more merciful to you than your own self. The ayah ends with the words, Inna Allah kana bikum rahima. Verily Allah is merciful to you, or He was merciful to you. Why? Allah has mentioned all of these things. He knows better than you know yourself what is good for you. He is more merciful to you than you are to your own self. That is why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in a hadith, Inna Allah khalaqa mi'ata rahma. Allah created 100 parts of mercy. فَأَنزَلَ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ رَحْمَةً وَاحِدَةً, and He put down on this earth one part of that 100. بِهَا يَتَرَاحَمُ الْخَلْقُ, with that one part of mercy, all of His creation, they have rahmah with each other. They have mercy to each other. A mother and her child, to your wife, to your spouse, to your children, to your siblings, to your fellow men, to animals and animals between each other. Every single creation of Allah, the rahmah that we encompass, all of us, from the time of Adam or from the creation of this world till the end of this world, when we were sent on the plains of Qiyamah, all of that is one part of the parts of rahmah which Allah has created. And then Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, وَتَرَكَ 99 رَحْمَةً لِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ, and He has left 99 parts out of that 100. One part for us, 99 parts on the day of Qiyamah. So who now is more merciful? Are we more merciful to our own selves in what we do, or is Allah more merciful? Allah is more merciful. That's why Hammad ibn Salama used to say, لو خيرت, if I had to be given a choice, يوم القيامة لو خيرت يوم القيامة أن أحاسب, if I was given the choice on the day of Qiyamah, بين أن يحاسبني أمي وأبي, through if I was given the choice that I would be accounted for, I would be accounted for on the day of Qiyamah by my mother and father, or أن يحاسبني Allah, or if Allah had to take my accounting, he said, I will choose the accounting of Allah. Why? Because Allah is more merciful to you than even your own mother and your own father. He said, لَاخْتَرْتُ أَنْ يُحَاسِبَنِي Allah. So there is a reality of the situation, and that is why the ayah ends like that. Thereafter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ عُدْوَانًا وَظُلْمًا فَسَوْفَ نُصْلِيهِ نَارًا وَكَانَ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرًا. And whoever does that in aggression and injustice, then we will drive him into a fire, and that for Allah is always easy. Whoever does what? Whoever does business, whoever eats the wealth of another, or whoever kills themselves. What is meant by this ayah? By the second ayah, because it's an attachment in meaning. The first is a opinion of Ata. He says that what is meant, whoever does this word this, in aggression and injustice, then we will drive him into a fire. The word this here is referring to whoever takes their own life or kills, what you said, the three opinions, kill somebody else or take their own life, then for them is the fire. He said there is the meaning. Others said no, because the ayah is, and there is in Arabic when you talk about, it's called aqrab madhkur. The last proper noun, or the last noun which was mentioned apparently was to kill oneself. So it goes back to that. Others said no, because the ayah is continuous and in one format. Whoever does this in aggression and injustice is talking about whoever eats the wealth of somebody else in aggression and injustice, or whoever kills somebody or kills themselves, then for them is the fire, and upon Allah that is easy. Others like Imam Al-Tabari, they said there is not the meaning. They said that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began Surah Al Nisa, and this ayah is ayah number 29, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about the rights of women when it comes to marriage, and He spoke about inheritance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after this spoke about the rights of marriage and the rights of others, and who you are allowed to marry and not marry, and the rights of those who have been slandered. All of that. And every time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned some of the rights or the responsibilities, He ended off by that one who does not carry it out, or the one who oversteps, with a wa'ad or a wa'id. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ended with a severe punishment, mentioning the punishment, or mentioning what is for the one who oversteps or the one who does not comply with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rules. Except in one ayah, Allah did not mention. And that ayah was the ayah we done last week. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yahillu lakum an tarithu an-nisaa karha. Oh, you believe, do not inherit your woman karha. You are not allowed to inherit your woman or take the wives of your fathers as yours and hold them back and usurp their inheritance and take their wealth. You are not allowed to do that, as we mentioned in detail in last week's lesson. In this ayah here, Allah did not mention any wa'id. And He says that this verse here, which is 10 verses later, is referring to that ayah and what came between that ayah and this verse here, that whoever does this, all these actions, from that verse till this verse here, verse number 32, 31, whoever does this in aggression or injustice, then for them is the fire, and there is easy upon Allah. So it's inclusive of everything which was mentioned up until this point here, and that is the opinion of Imam At-Tabari, rahimahullah. Others said that it is, this verse here is inclusive of everything from the beginning of the surah till where it comes about everything. If you were to obey, disobey, whether it's inheritance, the rights of a woman when it comes to marriage, your marital rights, who are allowed to marry, not allowed to marry, what is mentioned in this verse, everything which is overstepped or done in injustice in those certain specific situations mentioned from the beginning of Surah Al Nisa, then for you is the fire upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is easy. And those are the opinions which are mentioned when it comes to these verses. However, the word used here is وَمَن يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ عُدْوَانٍ. What is the word udwan? It's translated as aggression. Udwan actually means to overstep a boundary. That's what udwan actually means, to overstep a boundary. وَظُلْمًا, and dhulm means oppression. Oppression actually means to place something in a place which is not correct. To put something in its incorrect place. There is the literal meaning, or rather the shar'i meaning of oppression and udwan. So udwan, we said, means to overstep a boundary, and we translate it as aggression. And dhulm, which is translated as injustice or oppression, is to place something out of its correct place. It is not in its correct place. And here there's something to mention. Some of the contemporary scholars like Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Dado, Hafidhullah, may Allah protect him, when he mentioned these ayat, and he uses it as evidence, and I want everybody to concentrate with me that remember something. Any evidence given by somebody or fatwa given by somebody based on their understanding does not mean it is correct. Please, that's the first thing. The second thing, there can be differences between scholars, and the differences, if they are based on sound deduction, then they are all taken into account. And if they are not based on sound deduction, then they are not taken into account. What they call khilaf mu'tabar or ghair mu'tabar. Khilaf, differences which are mu'tabar, which are taken into account, and that which is not taken into account. So the Shaykh here, when it comes to these ayat, he uses it as a evidence for what people call martyrdom operations or suicide bombings. So, and he says that, and we know when somebody kills themselves by blowing themselves up, we call it a martyrdom operation. Some people call, like what's prevalent in Palestine or other places, what was prevalent previously also in the Caucasus, the areas which are occupied by Russia, and it may still be prevalent there, where somebody attaches explosives to themselves and they blow themselves up. We know there is clear suicide, they're killing themselves. However, is it allowed in the Sharia or not? Based on the clear proofs, it's not allowed. However, here he deduces that it may be allowed with quyud. There are certain stipulations and boundaries which allow it in a certain situation. Remember, fatwa can only be given by people of knowledge and those who understand the situation correctly or are involved in the situation directly. For them is a fatwa. We now speaking about something for purposes of knowledge, and we're not speaking about it literally. We're not speaking about literally. Nobody is giving fatwa here. We're speaking about what can be deduced from the ayat. So the ayat begin, وَمَن يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ عُدْوَانًا وَظُلْمًا. Whoever does that, عُدْوَانًا, through aggression, وَظُلْمًا, and injustice, then for him is the fire. Whoever does what? We said, in the Arabic language, when you mention something which is not clear, like you mention a pronoun, or you mention a demonstrative pronoun. The demonstrative pronoun has replaced a noun which is known. Here, they said it replaces the statement of, and if you do not kill yourselves, and verily Allah is merciful to you. Whoever does that, killing themselves in aggression or in injustice, then for them is the fire. Meaning whoever does it, not in terms of aggression and against their own selves, or not in injustice against their own selves, then the understanding is that then for them is not the fire. For them is not the fire. And this in the Sharia is known as mafhum al-mukhalafa. In usul it's known as mafhum al-mukhalafa, the understanding of what is opposite to it. Meaning that Allah said, do not kill yourself. There is a command. You are not allowed to kill yourself, it's haram. And then Allah says, but whoever kills themselves, if you kill yourself in aggression or in injustice, then for you is the fire. Meaning if it was done in terms of iman, in conviction and ihtisab and wanting reward, then for you is not the fire. For you is the opposite, paradise. So there is what he comes to. And he says, and I'll give you the breakdown of how he gets to that. Firstly, you'll understood the picture of where it's coming from. The first thing, he says jihad is wajib. We're speaking now about specifically about what they call suicide operations or suicide bombings or martyrdom operations. Jihad is wajib. Everybody knows jihad is wajib. And there's a qaida in the Sharia, there's a rule in the Sharia or maxim that ما لا يتم الواجب إلا به فهو واجب. Any action which is compulsory and that compulsory action cannot be completed except by another action, it makes a secondary action compulsory as well. For example, salah is wajib. You have to be in the state of tahara to read salah. Hence, when the time for salah comes, if you're not in the state of tahara, wudu becomes wajib upon you. So wudu also becomes wajib. Right? Wudu is not wajib. For example, if salah time came and you were in the state of tahara, wudu was not wajib. But when tahara was necessary for a wajib action to be carried out, the wudu became wajib. So the same thing. He says when jihad is necessary to be carried out, it is wajib, it is compulsory, then that which facilitates for the jihad also becomes compulsory. That's the first point he gives. So he says, in a situation where jihad cannot be fought except through the means of explosives where a person blows themselves up, then that becomes something which is allowed in the Sharia. That's the first point he gives. The second point he says that the ayah, the mafhum, the understanding of it, he said if it's done through aggression or injustice, then it's something which is haram, and not, then you will get the opposite of it. It is allowed, like we have been explaining now. The third, he says that this year, speaking about the aggression and the injustice, is the illah, is the reasoning for one getting punished. If you done it, if you killed yourself or killed somebody else, or you exploded, you killed yourself rather, and you done it out of aggression, meaning you committed suicide, no reason, or injustice, you are oppressing yourself, he says that's the illah, that's the reasoning for you getting hellfire. So he says this reasoning here only goes, the hukm, the law only goes with the reasoning. And in Arabic they call this, or in usul al-fiqh they say, al-illatu al-hukmu yaduru ma'al-illah. The hukm, the law is only sustained because of its reasoning. So if the reason that Allah gave is removed, then the law is removed. So he says, so when we remove it and say somebody does it out of iman and they are unable to carry out jihad in any other way and they want the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it forms part of jihad and it is removed. Right? That's the third thing they gave. People done i'tirad. People done objection on his statement or on his deduction. And his deduction makes sense. The first i'tirad or objection, they said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة. In Surah Al-Tawbah, ayah number 111. For Allah has purchased from the believers their lives and their wealth, and for them is paradise. يقاتلون في سبيل الله. They fight in the way of Allah. فيقتلون ويقتلون. They are killed and then they يقتلون. They kill and then they are killed. Here, when a person commits suicide, blowing himself up, he dies first and then he kills others, the opposite to the ayah. He mentions a refutation to this and he says there is one recital, or there is one narration of recital, and Imam Al-Kisai, his narration is the opposite way. They kill themselves and then they are killed. فَيُقَتَلُونَ. They are killed and then they kill. Right? And he doesn't mention anything else. He says there's a refutation. To say this ayah is not a refutation on the deduction that we've given for our ayah. The second proof that they give against this deduction, to say that this is not speaking or legislating martyrdom operations, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows those who believe, and He is the one who selects for Himself a shuhada. Now here, when you commit suicide by blowing yourself up, and you claim it to be a martyrdom operation, you are now claiming martyrdom for yourself, and Allah didn't select you. He also answers this and says there is not what is meant by the ayah. There is not what is meant by the ayah. What is meant by the ayah is that even if a person went to war, to battle, and they had to die in that war, Allah is the one who chooses the martyrs, meaning it is upon Allah to select for you whose intention was correct, So they are counted from the martyrs, and whose correction is intention is not correct, so they are not counted from the martyrs. And the hadith is clear in this. The hadith is clear that on the day of Qiyamah, a person who dies on the battlefield will come to Allah and he'll ask him, Allah will ask him, what did you do? He said, I fought for you, and he'll mention what he done on the battlefield, and Allah will say to him, you only did it so people can say you were brave, and it was said that you were brave, and that is your reward. So you can be seen in this world as a martyr, and everybody who dies on the battlefield, we should regard them as martyrs. But are they actually martyrs? That is dependent on the intention, and none knows what the chest conceal besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they're just on the side to understand something from this ayah, and I think it's necessary for us to go through that and to understand that. The next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إن تجتنبوا كبائر ما تنهون عنه نكفر عنكم سيئاتكم وندخلكم مدخلا كريما. If you avoid the major sins which you are forbidden, we will remove from you your lesser sins and admit you to a noble entrance. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this surah mentioned everything that was forbidden from the beginning up until this ayah, and all of these actions are from al-kaba'ir, major sins. Usurping somebody's inheritance, forcing a woman into marriage, taking her, inheriting the wives of your fathers, being unjust to your wives, all of this, the rights of the woman, the rights of inheritance, all of the rights up until this point here, all of it are from al-kaba'ir, the major sins. All right? Allah says, if you stay away from these major sins, and the ayah is general for all major sins, نُكَفِّرْ عَنْكُمْ سَيِّئَاتِكُمْ, we will do away with your lesser sins and admit you a noble entrance, meaning into paradise. Here Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in regards to this, that the minor sins are expiated through certain actions. And he said, الصلوات الخمس والجمعة إلى الجمعة, in Muslim hadith of Abu Hurairah, that the 5 salahs, and a Friday to Friday, ورمضان إلى رمضان, and Ramadan to Ramadan, مكفرات ما بينهن إذا اجتنبت الكبائر, they expiate what is between them in terms of sinning lesser sins, if you stay away from al-kabair, the major sins. And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said in Sahih ibn Hibban that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam once said on a minbar, and he said similar words, and again he said, if you stay away from the 7 major sins, from the 7 major sins, and the 7 major sins are mentioned in a hadith where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Ash-shirk billah, shirk, the association of partners from Allah, is a major sin. Was-sihr, and sorcery. وَقَتْلُ النَّفْسِ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ, and to take the life of somebody else without any right, except what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given right to, that you can do, execution. وَأَكْلُ الرِّبَى, and eating of interest. وَأَكْلُ مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ, and eating the wealth of the orphan. وَالتَّوَلِّي يَوْمَ الزَّحْفِ, and to run away from the battlefield or to flee from the battlefield. وَقَذْفُ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ الْغَافِلَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ, and to slander a chaste woman. These 7 major sins. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, if you stay away from them, then your lesser sins will be expiated. Here some of the usuliyun, they said that this is not correct in the meaning. That how we are understanding it right now is not the correct meaning to understand it. And they said, usuliyun means those who deal with principles of jurisprudence. They said that if you say that if you stay away from major sins, then the minor sins are expiated. It means that the minor sins are in fact just like doing something which is allowed in the Sharia because they are expiated, and this is now causing a problem in the Sharia because the Sharia is not consistent. So rather, the understanding should be that all sins should be looked at as major sins, and doing certain actions is that those actions, meaning the salah and what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned in the ahadith, those actions expiate your minor sins. They do away with them, but it doesn't mean you didn't commit the sin. It's written still in your book. It's still in your book that you have done the sin, but they nullify them in terms of the balance. The major sins remain, and for those major sins you need to do tawbah. And that is why Al-Qushayri, he says that every single sin should be looked at as a major sin. And Al-Qurtubi, he comments on this statement, and he says that لا تنظر إلى صغر الذنوب, do not look at the minute nature of your transgression. For example, somebody does something, say it's a simple thing, it's not a major sin. I didn't commit adultery, I didn't do shirk, I didn't take interest, I didn't do whatever. He says, do not look at how minute your sin is, but rather look at the one that you have transgressed his boundaries. How major is that one? That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in this case, it can be understood that all sins are major sins. However, the level what is mentioned in the Quran, where Allah says the minor sins, in accordance to each other, not in accordance to the transgression against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is meant by this? For example, committing shirk is not the same as doing zina. In terms of the weight of the sins, shirk is a much worse sin than zina, than adultery. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ. Allah does not forgive if somebody associates partners with him. وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. And he forgives that which is beneath that, under that. So compared to shirk, zina is a small sin. But compared to zina, maybe kissing a woman on her lips is a smaller sin compared to that. Here, zina is not like kissing a woman on her lips, and so on and so forth. Compared to each other, they are not, they can be looked at as there is a minor sin and that's a major sin. But in the larger picture of things, they are all major sins because of the one who has been transgressed or whose boundaries have been transgressed. And some say that what is meant in this ayah is actually shirk. Kaba'ir means shirk. All the other sins Allah may forgive, and shirk is what is meant in this ayah. In tajtanibu kaba'ira ma tunhawna an. If you stay away from kaba'ir, meaning from shirk, because one of the recitations is kabira, and in the other ayah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to shirk as the sin which cannot be forgiven. Everything after that will be expiated and forgiven. Here one needs to understand, when you say major sins and minor sins, which sin is considered that major sin? That major sin which cannot be expiated, like we said by the ahadith we mentioned, where salah and hajj and Ramadan, then do not expiate these sins. Which are those major sins which require tawbah and a person leaving them in this lifetime for him to be forgiven? Those major sins can be identified by certain criteria. Ibn Abbas said, Al-kabiratu kullu dhanbin khatama Allah bin nar. Every single transgression which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends with the fire. He mentions that the fire is the person's reward. There is a major sin. Or ghadab, or Allah's anger is upon them. There is a major sin. Or la'na, or Allah's curse is upon them. There is a major sin. Or adhab, or Allah has specifically mentioned a punishment in this world or in the year after. There is a major sin. Or, and Ibn Abbas didn't say this, it is those things which are mentioned in the Sharia as major sins. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Ijtanibu sab'a al-mubiqat, stay away from the 7 al-muhlikat, those which destroy, and he mentioned, and we mentioned all 7. So these are all how to identify, or the categories of major sins can be identified like this. Somebody asked Ibn Abbas about the number of major sins. Are they 7? And he said they are closer to 70. And in another narration, he said they are closer to 700. However, there is no number, and the scholars differ upon the number of major sins. Al-Dhahabi wrote a complete book called Al-Kaba'ir, where he mentioned each major sin and mentioned its proof for why it is a major sin. However, like I said, they differed upon the numbers. Ibn Umar, he says there are 9. The 7 which I mentioned in the hadith previously, and he includes upon those 7 2 others, and they are uquq al-walidain, being or not being dutiful to your parents, and shahadatu zur, and false testimony. And like this, the major sins are categorized, but we said there are levels. The highest of them is a shirk. Shirk. If you associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a highest major sin. Why? Because there is the reason you were created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And we mentioned the proof. Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bihi wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha. After that, from the major sins is to have despair in the mercy of Allah. Why? Because that takdhib lil Quran. You are belying the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La taqnatu min rahmatillah. Do not despair in the mercy of Allah. إِنَّهُ لَا يَئِسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرِينَ. Al-Kafirun. None despairs in the mercy of Allah except Al-Qawm Al-Kafirun, except the people who disbelieve. So there is also a major sin. To be safe, to feel safe from the plane of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also is a major sin. All mentioned in the Quran. And Al-Qurtubi then mentions all these categories. Zina is a major sin. Drink, why? Because it has a problem when it comes to lineage. It destroys lineage. Shurb al-Khamr, drinking of alcohol, is a major sin because it does away with the person's intellect for that time. So he gives a illah, he gives a reasoning for each major sin and why is it a major sin. And there is in the Tafseer, these things are mentioned, but we had the criterion, and I mentioned the criterion of how to identify a major sin. Anything which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the fire, or his adhab, or his ghadab, his anger, or there's la'na, there's a curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or it is specifically mentioned that this is a major sin in the Sharia from the Quran and the Hadith. However, there's glad tidings for a believer. There's glad tidings for a believer. If these actions in this world expiate the minor sins, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in the Hadith, إِدَّخَرْتُ شَفَاعَتِي لِأَهْلِ الْكَبَائِرِ مِنْ أُمَّتِي, that I have kept my intercession for the people of major sins on the day of Qiyamah, then for every believer in this world who does not die on shirk, meaning he dies on tawheed, his minor sins may be expiated in this world from his good deeds or from what may come for him to him in affliction, and his major sins may be interceded for them on the day of Qiyamah. So Allah forgives your minor sins in this world, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam will intercede for you for your major sins on the day of Qiyamah. And that is why Abdullah ibn Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the son of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, used to say, Al-Muslimuna kulluhum fil Jannah. The Muslims, all of them are in paradise, and he used this reasoning here, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Ibn Mas'ud, he used to say that there are 5 ayat in Surah Al Nisa which are more beloved to me than this whole world and what it contains, and one of them is this ayah. In tajtanibu kaba'ira ma tunhuna. If you stay away from that which you have been prohibited, kaba'ir, the big, the major sins, nukaffir ankum sayyatikum. We will forgive for you your smaller sins. And Ibn Abbas used to say 8 ayat in Surah Al Nisa are better for the people, for the Muslims, if they knew. And he mentioned from those 8 this ayah here. And the last ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبْنَ وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, or سَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ in another riwayah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. Allah says, and do not wish for that by which Allah has made some of you exceed others. For men is a share of what they have earned, and for women is a share of what they have earned. And ask Allah of His bounty. Indeed, Allah is ever of all things knowing. They say this ayah was revealed because Salama, who was one of the first women to do hijrah to Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara, she came to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and she said, the men, they do jihad and we don't do jihad. They elevate, they're higher than us, and we know the fadl of jihad. And this ayah was revealed. And there are many narrations, but that narration is mursal, meaning there's a break in the chain between the narrator and Salama and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And some others say that it was revealed because in the time of Jahiliyyah, they would not give their woman any inheritance. Then the woman, Islam came and it gave them inheritance, and then they said that why are we not the same like men in inheritance? And this ayah was revealed, for men is what they earn. لِلْرِجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا. For men is what they have earned, and for women is what they have earned, meaning what they earn in terms of the year after. In terms of the year after. For men is what they earn, because Allah has made us all different. Men, women, our different races, different people. When it comes to wealth, when it comes to beauty, when it comes to language, we are all different. So here, when it says for men is what they have earned, meaning in the year after. What has been put upon you, which is compulsory upon you specifically, you will earn for that in the year after. The same are men and women. That is why Allah is saying, do not desire what the other has. And this can be understood clearly. If you look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, there's a wisdom behind it. If everybody was the same, things would not work perfectly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who chooses and He is the one who prefers some of others. Allah, when He created mankind, He created the messengers from mankind and He preferred them over all of mankind. وَكُلًّا فَضَّلْنَا عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. And all of them we have preferred over mankind. So He created men who are above all of mankind. And from all the messengers, He preferred Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam upon all of them. And from the angels, when He created the angels, He preferred Jibreel over all of the angels. He made him of a higher status. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the stones, He created the black stone and He preferred it over all of stones, all of the stones. And when Allah created water, He preferred the water of Zamzam over all of water. He is given certain things status. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created women, He preferred Maryam bint Imran and Asiya and Fatima bint Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Khadija. All these women He preferred over the rest of the women. And when He created the prophets, He preferred the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam over all of the companions. And like this, when Allah created men and women, He preferred in each certain characteristics over one another. That is why men and women are not equal. And Allah is saying that for you is what you earn in the year after, not here. We are equal in terms of our reward. Doesn't mean when Allah says He multiplies 10 times, He multiplies for certain people 10 times and not for others. He multiplies for men 10 times and for women 9 times. No, we are the same. But we need to understand, when Allah prefers somebody, it means there is an obligation which is linked to that preference. That is why they say, الزيادة في التشريف زيادة في التكليف. An increase in honor. If Allah honors you with something, meaning that you have been honored with something, you will also have a bigger responsibility and obligation. That is why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he was honored with prophethood, what is his responsibility and obligation? Do you know that Tahajjud Salah is compulsory upon the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? It was compulsory. Allah mentions in the Quran, in Surah Al Muzammil, if you go to battle, you are allowed to run from the battlefield if their numbers are double yours. Or at the day of Hunayn, when everybody left, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and few of the companions were alone. A prophet is not allowed to flee from the battlefield. He himself stood at Hunayn alone. There are many things like that which are allowed for certain people depending on what Allah has given you. But if He honors you with something else, or if He honors you, then your taklif, then your responsibility and your obligation also increases. So here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored men with inheritance, your responsibility towards a woman increased. And the same for everything a man or a woman has been honored with, their responsibility increases. Allah is saying, do not desire that which He has given others. Allah has the hikmah, He knows, and He has put this in place for a certain reason that may not be clear to us now, and some of it may be clear and some of it not. And here somebody needs to understand, when a man is given that inheritance or whatever it may be in terms of Allah honoring him, that obligation upon him is he needs to look after the woman folk. For them is not their wealth that it be used. Your wealth needs to be used to maintain and to sustain, and it is not for the woman folk. Let's say somebody doesn't do it, then for them Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared a punishment. The same way, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a duty upon a woman and we can't take recourse and she does not carry out the duty, in the same way she will be punished. The same way when the duty is upon a man and he doesn't do it, he will be punished. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best why He has done certain things and why He has given certain characteristics and certain privileges to some over others, like we mentioned the angels and the prophets and men and women between each other. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not desire what the other has. لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا. And why men and women are mentioned here specifically, we said the reason is because I was speaking initially about inheritance. For what men do, they have earned their share. And what women do, they have earned their share. Remember, we are all equal in the eyes of Allah, but we are not identical in our situations and in our roles. But we all have the potential. So if I am born into a wealthy family and I have it easy, my potential and my role to gain Jannatul Firdaus is the same as somebody who was born into a family of difficulty and they had certain trials and tribulations and they had poverty. The potential to get the highest place in Jannah is the same. Our potential is exactly the same. What is different is the way that we are being tested. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala levels the playing fields by saying that you will get rewarded based on how I see you, my servant, and what situation I have put you in front of. All of us are equal in that. So when you see somebody going through real hardships, remember that their potential to attain Jannah through those hardships is the same as your potential. Your test is ease, their test is hardship. Your test is wealth, their test is poverty. Your test is being a man, and you need to have these certain responsibilities. You can't turn around tomorrow and say, it's so easy for a woman, she doesn't have to go fight jihad fi sabilillah, and we go out and you have to fight and you may lose a limb and lose a leg. If you don't go fight, you're going to get punished. And the same way for a woman, she can't say, the man can go to the masjid, or a man says, the woman can pray at home, we have to go to the masjid, it's compulsory upon us. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you as a man certain responsibilities or certain honor by certain things, the responsibility and the obligation increased. So when He gave you the responsibility to be in charge of the house, you also had the responsibility. You have to greet salah in jama'ah. When there's a call for jihad, you must go for jihad. The woman doesn't have that. It's the same thing. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a woman responsible for her children in the house, and He gave her that honor, that she is the mother. Where does Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, where's Jannah? At the feet of the mother. Why? When you are given that honor there to be praised in that manner, then the responsibility for the children and the household became more. You were honored, so your taklif became more. In the same way a man was honored, his taklif becomes more. And the prophets, they were honored, so their taklif, their responsibility and the obligation became more. But what is required? You do not desire what the other has. Allah says, La tatamanna. Do not desire that. Allah is forbidding you from desiring that. Does that mean we can't desire at all? Is desiring something haram? No. If you desire something in this world, for this worldly basis, it is haram. If you desire for the year after to be like somebody else, that is allowed. And this is clear from the hadith when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا حسد إلا في اثنتين. There is no jealousy except in two. رجل آتاه الله القرآن فهو يقوم به آناء الليل وآناء النهار. A man who Allah has given the Quran and he stands with it in the day and in the night. ورجل آتاه الله مالا. And a man who is given wealth, فهو ينفقه آناء الليل وآناء النهار. And he spends that wealth in Allah's path day and night. You can be jealous, you can desire like what that person has to do what they do. In another hadith, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and the one who desires with a true heart to do what that one does, meaning he's given the Quran or given wealth so that he may do the same action, then he is the same as the one who has done it. Meaning if you don't have that wealth, but you desire so and so built a masjid, so and so looking after so many orphans, digging so many wells, doing all this with his wealth, I don't have wealth, I can't do it. You are equal to him if your intention is correct. So that is what needs to be understood. However, what is forbidden here is there's three types of hasad, three types of jealousy. First one you mentioned, there is what you call a ghibta, where you desire what somebody has so that you have the same and you may do the same like them. That's the first type, right? You don't desire anything bad for them. The second type is where you desire what somebody has, they must lose it and you must gain it, and there is haram in the Sharia. And the last one is the worst type, where you desire what somebody has, but you desire it to a point that you want them to lose it even if you do not gain it. There is the worst type of hasad or jealousy. So in the Sharia, what is allowed is ghibta, where you desire what somebody has to do as they do in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you may desire that which is allowed, right, in terms of status. That is why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in a hadith, speaking about martyrdom, he said, وَدِدْتُ أَنْ أُقَاتِلَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ أَحْيَا فَأُقْتَلْ. Saying about the martyrs, I hope that I will fight in the path of Allah, then I will be killed and I will be brought back to life so that I may be killed again. Here you desiring something which is praiseworthy. You desire the akhirah. All these ahadith refer to the akhirah, and not desiring, I wish I had so much wealth so that I may buy a house, or I wish I had a wife like so and so, so beautiful, or a car like so and so, or a house like so and so, or a business as powerful as so and so, or so much wealth, or holiday home, or this or that. All people's possessions of this world is forbidden. Why? Because if you look at what others have, Allah is saying, do not desire that. It will keep you always in a state of unhappiness. That is why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, when it comes to religion, desire that which is above you. And when it comes to this world, look at those which are below you. Don't desire what people have. Then Allah ends the ayah telling us how. If you have this and you want it, and you're not going to desire, and you are steadfast upon yourself, وَاسْأَلُ اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Ask Allah for His bounty. You don't need to desire what anybody has. Ask Allah from His bounty. He is the one who has all bounty, and everything is between His hands. He may give you more than what others have, but ask Him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends the ayah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all knowing. He knows all things. Why? You may see the differences between each other. We may see that somebody has and somebody does not have. We may see that Allah has favored some of us over others, but we may not understand the wisdom behind it. That is why Allah ends the ayah and He says, Allah knows. Inna Allah kana bi kulli shay'in alima. Allah is knowing of all things. He knows why He done it, and it is for wisdom. And when we die and we see the resurrection and we understand how Allah will judge between us, we will understand at that time the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these things. Or we may not understand. At the end of the day, we are the possessions of Allah. He is able to do with us as He pleases. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the understanding. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.